This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow Cook Eat Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and my old friend who lives in the Netherlands and who is Dutch, Carien van Boxtel, who you met last week because we did a podcast episode on bulbs in grass. And I've come back to Carien again this week to talk to her about bulbs in woodland because, to be honest, I know few gardeners. In fact, I really don't think I know any gardener that knows more about bulbs, particularly about naturalising bulbs than Carien. And I've been going to Holland with her maybe now for about 15 years, and she's taken me to the most wonderful gardens. I was inspired by Great Dixter and the incredible naturalised bulbs there. And I've seen similarly beautiful sites, which I'm sure Carien will talk about in our talk. So welcome, Carien. It's lovely to have you back again.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm happy to be back again.
Oh, good. So we're going to do the similar format that we've done, which I know lots of the listeners like, which is our 12, well, not our, Carien's 12 favourite bulbs for naturalising in shade, basically. So whether it's at the bottom of the hedge, under a tree in your garden, or even if you've got a more expansive area and you've got perhaps a little area of woodland, these are the bulbs that Carien really recommends for planting now in the autumn to look fabulous next spring and for many, many springs after that. So, Carien, what is your number one?
Well, my number one is a familiar one because it's the snowdrop, the galanthus, and there are more than one galanthus, as you will know. I'm not a galanthophile as such, but I do love the common galanthus nivalis, which is the common snowdrop, and that is one of the best to multiply in your garden. Helped by ants, by the way. Did you know that?
Oh, I knew that was cyclamen. No, tell us about.
Yeah. Well, a lot of these bulbous plants, especially spring bulbs, when they are seeding, in their seed heads attached to it is a little. Well, we call it a mierenbroodje, an ant bread, piece of bread. It's in fact sugary. And it's food for ants and for their larvae, and they take it to their nests. And while they are carrying that, it's an enormous load for the small ant. They are seeding. They are helping to spread the seeds of the galanthus. So that is an interesting strategy for naturalising. So the ants are really helping us in our gardens. So I won't spend a lot, but what is so good about the snowdrop that it can really be anywhere, whether in the meadow, in a more shady area. And with shade, I mean the shade of trees and shrubs, because that I think is a very important aspect of all of these plants. They do not particularly thrive in shade, but they thrive in the opportunity before the leaves appear. So the shade of buildings is something else, obviously, because all of these plants that I'm going to discuss, they are looking for their perfect opportunity when the bottom of the garden, when your floor of the garden will have a spot of sun. So they are shade loving, but they need light anyway. But that's because the spring is offering them just the right amount of light. So that is what's so interesting about bulbs, especially because you need the light. And they can thrive in shade later on. They're perfectly fine. But in March or April or even May, they need that spark of sunlight. It's good to know. So buildings are something else, obviously. Yeah.
Okay. And if you planted them in full sun, would they do as well as in this dappled shade?
Galantis probably, yes. Okay. I think so. Yeah. Well, they are sometimes a bit hidden by the grass if you plant them in the meadow.
Yeah.
It's a completely dry. In a dry garden, they won't thrive. I think they need humus and
moisture.
Moisture, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. And what's your number 2?
Yeah, that is not everyone's taste, but I love them. They're the aroms. I'm not really sure what your
Lords
English
lords and ladies.
Well, that's a beautiful name for them, because I'm not particularly fond of the flowers. The berries are nice, the orange berries, but I love the leaves, and they give me a lot of winter interest, especially the Italica with this lovely stripy patterns on them. And they are a great backdrop for snowdrops or whatever. So, and they're often forgotten, or people think they're a pest because they can spread. But I think that's a bonus.
And in English, they're called lords and ladies because the spathe of the female is a different colour. I think the spathe of the female is yellow and the spathe of the male is brown. I think something like that. Anyway.
Yeah, they're pollinated by flies, not bees. So that's, and they can smell a bit. But never mind.
Never mind. Okay,
never
perfect.
Mind. Next one. Another one that is often forgotten because people tend to hate yellow. Well, a lot of people, not everyone. I'm certainly not. And this is, again, I do not know your English name, but we call it Eranthus.
Yeah. Hi, Melis. Yeah. So these are aconites in English.
Aconites, we say winter aconites. And there are two. So there's Cilicia, and there's Hyemalis, where the first one is the Turkish variety. And actually, I prefer that a little bit more than the Hyemalis, which is the European variety, because the flowers are more visible. So they have a little green color. The flowers, they are surrounded by a green color. And the Cilicia, the color is a bit smaller, so the flower is more visible. And they flower exactly in the same period as Nivalis. And I've seen woodlands covered in Galanthus nivalis in combination with this golden yellow of the Eranthus, and it's simply magical.
Yes, I've seen them with you. I've seen them with you in the Netherlands. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Next, Erythronium. Dog's tooth, I think.
Yes, dog's tooth violet. Yeah.
Violet. Okay, we say Holstand, and well, you and I know why, but when you look at the tuber, then you see the shape of a dog's tooth.
Yeah, it looks like our canine teeth.
Yeah, it's funny, but they're also often forgotten because well, it's rare in gardens, and I think that's a shame. It's a beautiful plant, again, for its elegant flowers. It's like a mini lily.
Yeah.
The sort of acid green that you love so much, especially pagoda, which is my favorite, by the way.
Yeah.
And the leaves are very beautiful as well, spotted leaf. So don't forget that. And it's a great bulb. It doesn't spread that fast. So you need a special place for it, and not just a one, but always a group. But don't forget that one. It's really, really beautiful.
I remember as a child botanizing in the foothills of the Dolomites, and dog's tooth violets, just the species wild pink flowered form with those beautiful dappled leaves again. I remember finding carpets of those just outside the town of Asolo and getting terribly excited. I agree. I think they're incredibly undergrown. I think it's because they're quite expensive to buy and they take a while to settle in, almost like nerines or something. But I think they're really underused, and I adore them too. Totally agree.
Good. Next, another. What an easy one. It's the Leucodium vernum. We all know the estivum, which is the more snowdrop. I think this is then the spring snowflake in your language. So it's a bit of confusing because people think they are snowdrops and they're not. They're leucodiums. And then the more well-known one, the estivum, that grows very tall. And you also have the rabbit-eyed giant. It's more for sun and in humid places. But the vernum is quite small and quite special. But it is a bit tricky. But I love it so much because it's so early. And I've seen them for the first time in the Arboretum Kalmthout in Belgium, the gardens of Jelena de Belder. And she was friends with Bess Chatto and a great plantswoman. And you can still see small groups in the garden there. They're also in the Amstelveense Heemparken, where you and I went. The native parks that were founded in the 30s of last century. And but you can see that they are a bit tricky because the groups are not expanding, but they're so special. So yeah, let's move on to a more simple one, which is the bird in the bush.
Yes.
Also native in our country, probably native in your country, but there are many interesting cultivars in beautiful colors. So I tend to use them a lot in my mixes, as they provide lovely ferny leaves, the fresh green that you love so much in that time of year, and then these lovely spurry flowers, and they come in coral or even bright red, purple. So you have Beth Evans, which is the beautiful coral variety. And I love to sprinkle them around early tulips or because they are a great backdrop and not to be forgotten. And if they are really feeling at home, then they will spread.
Yes. And even if they don't spread, they come back for decades. And so again, in a way, like the erythroniums, not erythrum, anyway, the dog's tooth violets, they are expensive to buy, but that you'll be looking at them in 50 years' time. And that's what I think's wonderful about them. And by the way, everybody, all the Latin names and the places that Carien is mentioning, the gardens to visit next spring, as winter turns to spring, we'll put in the podcast notes. So you don't have to take notes because you can just download them from the website. And so lovely. I totally agree. The Corydalus family are fabulous. And so you're number 8.
Yeah, I forgot all about the Corydalus cava, which is your hollow root. And that's actually my absolute favorite in the whole of the family.
Okay.
Because it's bigger than all the others. And the flowers are also very visible and big. And they really, really stand out. But next, number 8. On my list, it says the anemone.
Yes.
And obviously, anemone is a very big family of plants, and I am referring to the Nemorosa family. So the woodland anemone, which is one of my favorite shade-loving bulb, I think, because it spreads. And in the Heem parks that I mentioned just now, they're now considered a weed. They form big carpets. And it is one of the only shade-loving bulbs that also thrive in not so fertile soil. So I've seen them in woodlands in the Netherlands where there is sandy soil, whereas most of these woodland bulbs and tubers, they thrive in more fertile, wet and soil with a lot of humus. But this one seems to feel at home in less fertile conditions. And they come in many cultivars. And there's a lovely yellow one that I love. And obviously the blue one, which is incredible, the light blue one, named after William Robinson, the Robinsoniana. And if you manage to grow big group of them, then we will be mesmerized. So on to Stilla, and especially the Siberica. It can be in shade. It can be. It thrives under hedges, and so that's a great one. And I love it so much because it has this dark blue. Probably you will say Venetian blue that we love so much in the spring. So another favorite, and there's a cultivar that's called Spring Beauty, and it has bigger, larger stems.
Yes, so it's better for picking.
Yes, for our lovely little posies that we love so much in the spring.
Yeah.
So number 10, well, that is also not anyone's favorite, but I love it. But be careful with it. It's the Allium ursinum, which is in your country known as the wild garlic.
Yes.
And we say daslook. Das is badger, and badgers eat, they feed on them. In the Heem parks, again, it's just a perfect spot to see all of these spring flowering bulbs. They are very careful with them. There's only one location where they can grow because they are so invasive that they will, they will fight all the other plants. But in your woodlands, I've seen them side by side with the bluebells.
Yes, yes, that's absolutely right. And so the wild garlic is in the damper, slightly darker ground, and the bluebells are in the slightly higher, lighter ground, further up in the wood. And they're almost like fingers, sort of crossing with each other. And they're balanced. They're completely balanced. The wild garlic doesn't invade the bluebell area, and the bluebell area doesn't invade the wild garlic. It's been the same for 30 years since we lived here, and it's beautiful.
Is that because of you have banks and height differences? Yeah. No, we don't have that much in the Netherlands. Yeah, that could be. And what is also so interesting is that all of these plants, they work together with the roots and the mycorrhiza in the soil. And that could be a whole separate podcast, but it's on how all of these plant groups work together. It's not just the shade.
Yeah.
But also the humus, the leaves that fall from the trees that will provide for humus, for more humus.
Yeah.
What is next on our list, Sarah?
The bluebell.
Well, it's a bit strange because it's in your country. They're sort of a holy flower, aren't they?
Yeah, they are really.
Yeah. They are. And I remember very well when I saw it for the very, very first time. Somewhere in Kent, I think in a coppiced woodland or a woodland that has been coppiced for a long, long, long time. In fact, that coppicing is important because that provides the light. Yeah. And also the leaves of the hazel, they deteriorate, they compost very well, very quickly, and that's also a very important condition. But the magic of those blue woodlands. Whenever I get the chance to design a little bit of a woodland garden, I immediately advise my client, plant bluebells. I must confess that all the bluebells that we can buy here in Holland are from your country.
Yeah. So they're the native rather than the Hispanica one.
Yes. Yeah. The Hispanic one, well, I don't need to explain. I didn't add it on my list, although I love it. The Spanish bluebell, but you cannot plant it too close together because they will cross, and you won't have the magical bluebell with its banded flower head that we love so much.
And the perfume you don't get in the Spanish, do you?
Exactly. And who doesn't love a bluebell? But it's in our country, it's not very, although it's native in our country, but only in a couple of places still growing, but most people don't think immediately about bluebells.
That's interesting. Yeah. And the final one is also very perfumed.
Yes. It was my grandmother's favorite, Convallaria maialis, which we call Lelietje van Dalen, and in your country it's Lily of the Valley, I think. Yeah. Well, the Mayflower, the French present a bunch of it on the 1st of May. It's very poisonous, by the way. and you shouldn't plant it next door to the wild garlic. I once had a client who sent me a picture and said, "Can we make pesto out of these leaves?"
Oh
And
gosh.
no, it's sometimes hard to see the difference,
Yeah.
especially when there's no flower yet. But I always, well, use your nose.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
aroma.
Use your nose. Yeah.
And you can use your nose when this is in flower, then it's magical. And I've seen carpets of it again in the Heem parks, but also in the wild, especially in Limburg, which is in the south of the Netherlands. And it's just magical and it's so easy. And there's also a pink cultivar that I love, but that's a bit more tricky. It's not naturalizing as well as the species one. So that will be my list.
That's fantastic, Cream. But will you just give us a few pointers, as somebody who plants more of these bulbs than anyone I know, on how to plant, and are there any sort of tips to success? Because some of the bulbs that we've talked about are quite expensive, so we don't want anyone to sort of waste their money in a way. So what any sort of key tips?
Well, I've already mentioned light and shadow. So when you're planting, it's full and the leaves are still on the tree. So you must imagine how your garden looks like in spring and whether there will be light on that spot that you want your bulb. So you need to be sure that you will have that. It doesn't need to be light all day, but sort of half a day. That's important. Don't plant any of these underneath evergreen trees because the soil there is just not good enough. There's no shade, obviously, because the leaves are still on the tree. So don't do that. If you think that your garden there's not enough humus, then
Mm-hmm.
it's advisable to make leaf mold. That is such a good thing to have to spread in winter. And all your bulbs will love it. They will love the extra feed. And it is also advisable to test your soil because most of the plants that I've mentioned, they are loving a pH value of 6 or more. So
Okay.
that's why a lot of older populations of these plants in Holland, you can find them near ruins or where buildings used to be because the stone debris still in the soil. So that is in fact very good for your plants. And also your path through, if you have a woodland garden or a woodland bed, then it is advisable to have paths made of seashells because that will provide for a lot of chalk. In the Heem parks, you can even see that around the edges of the paths, they're more floriferous because the rain sort of takes care of the spreading of the chalk. Yeah.
So limestone is really so the key thing is not too acid is what we're saying. So anything you can do to lime up your soil. Oh, that's so interesting. Do you know, I really didn't know that. That's such a good tip.
Yeah. And maybe, well, one of my credos is always more is more.
Mm-hmm.
So I know bulbs are expensive, especially in your country. But maybe you can get some snowdrops from a neighbor or someone else.
Yeah.
That's also a strategy. And try to help nature by digging your plants up and to spread them out, divide them. So make sure that you have ants in your garden. So they're important. And try to buy more of one variety than 10 of each. That would be my advice. If you have a lot of ivy or brambles or nettles hanging around in your garden, make sure that you take most of that away because the bulbs don't love it. Some people say, "Oh, I plant my anemones in between my ivies that cover the ground," but it's not advisable. Nor are brambles or nettles. All of these plants love the same conditions as our bulbs. And it's always a big contest between plants. And so we need to help them a bit.
Yeah. of course.
And my last tip is, don't let your dogs into your woodland garden. They will dig your bulbs up So, of course, dog in a garden is all very nice. But if you have just a small patch of woodland and spring bulbs, that would be a shame.
Yes.
In many situations, I see big holes where they're from dogs, where they dug and they dig up the bulbs. So that would be my main,
like badgers,
and moles also. Badgers and moles that belong to our nature, but actually I have a lot of moles in my garden. And then I see all kinds of bulbs coming up, so I have to replant them.
Oh, and funny, that they kick them out, and you have to re-put them in.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. Can I have just one more advice?
Of course.
It is a good idea if you want to plant them. Don't lay them in neat rows, but a nice way of spreading and to create a more naturalistic group is to throw them. So 2 hands full of bulbs and then throw them and plant them where they land. So that's nice to do with children, by the way. They love it.
Yeah. And so you do that in big landscaping projects.
I do that, but only because if they land in between plants, then you won't see them. So that can be a bore. But I try to do that, especially when I'm doing projects with children or with community gardens. People love that.
Mm. That's totally fantastic. So I'm just going to recap. So number 1 was a snowdrop and Galanthus nivalis. Number 2 was the Lords and Ladies, Arum maculatum or italicum. Number 3 was the aconite, Aranthus hyemalis. Number 4 was erythronium, the dog's tooth violet. Number 5 was the unusual snowflake, Leucojum vernum. Number 6 and 7 were both coriodalis. One was solida and the other was carva. Number 8 was various wood anemones, so the anemone nemorosus. Number 9 was Ascilla siberica, particularly spring beauty for its extra stem length. Number 10 is the wild garlic, Allium ursinum. Number 11 is our native wild bluebell, Hyacinthoides non-scripta. And finally, number 12 is Lily of the Valley, Convalera majalis. Well, what a fantastic list that is. And, even if one can only do, as you say, perhaps 1 or 2 1 year, 1 or 2 the next year, I think you're completely right. It's best to go in number with one thing and then follow it the next year with another rather than do ditty, dotty, dotty.
Yes, yeah. And I forgot all about the cyclamen. And,
you did?
I did. I'm so sorry. And there's so many beautiful ones. Right now we have the hedyrifolium in flower.
Yeah,
which is the autumn cyclamen, and then the coum will be in flower in spring. And right now, I love also the colchicums. They're so great in woodland. There are those pinks that we love so much. The pinks in October from the nerines, the asters, the cyclamens, and the naked ladies. The last summery bit before everything turns brown and black.
Very good. All right, Carien, thank you so much. Lovely to talk to you.
Lovely to talk to you, and see you soon, hopefully.
I hope you enjoyed listening to Carien van Boxtel. I find her knowledge just incredible to tap into, and I thought you would too. Next week, lovely Arthur is back, and we're going to talk about his new book that's out now in the autumn, Planting a Paradise. You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.